So much of our world, especially the global economy, runs on these, invisible rules. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on this hidden architecture of trade. We're talking about standards.
I mean, think about it for a second. What really holds global trade together? We're talking trillions of dollars, zipping between millions of people who will never meet. So, what's the secret sauce? How on earth can complete strangers trust each other enough to trade across vast oceans and entire continents?
Well, the answer is kind of found in this really powerful idea. It's all about agreement. When merchants, banks, governments, when they all agree on a shared standard, a simple routine, that routine, believe it or not, becomes the very bedrock of trust. And as we're about to see, that simple, quiet routine, it becomes a source of incredible power. Okay, so Section 1, the rules of the game. This is all about how shared standards literally create trust out of thin air. So if we're saying that routine can become power, where does it all begin? Well, it starts by tackling the most basic, fundamental challenge of global trade. How do you create trust where none exists?
The answer? You do it with a standard. Honestly, the best way to think about it is like a shared rulebook. It's just a common set of rules and procedures that everyone, and I mean everyone, agrees to play by. We're talking everything from the size of a shipping container to the nitty-gritty of how a payment gets settled. And that simple act of agreement, it just crushes uncertainty.
And you can really see the difference here, right? It's a night and day shift. Before you have standards, every single deal is a one-off, bespoke thing. It's slow, it's risky, it's super expensive. But after, suddenly you have this shared rulebook. And that brings predictability, it brings speed, and it brings this really cool concept of portable trust. And what that means is the trust you have in the system in, say, Rotterdam is the exact same trust you have in Shanghai, thousands of miles away. That is a huge structural advantage.
All right, so let's dig into how networks create power. Because once you've got that shared rulebook, what you've really done is created a network. And networks, well, they have their own powerful, almost unstoppable logic. So at the very heart of this network, you've basically got three core steps for any trade. First, you've got the trade itself, the agreement. Then comes clearing. This is where all the IOUs get tallied up and netted out. And finally, you have settlement. That's the key moment the money or the asset actually changes hands. Now, in normal times, this whole thing is super efficient. But in a crisis, that final step, the timing of the settlement, becomes absolutely everything.
And this right here, this is where the real power of the network kicks in. It's called the lock-in effect, or you've probably heard it called a network effect. It's a simple idea. The more people who adopt a standard, doesn't matter if it's a currency, a piece of software, or trade rules, the more valuable it becomes for everybody. It creates this kind of gravitational pull, a powerful momentum that makes it incredibly hard and super costly for anyone to just up and leave the network. So you gotta ask, what holds this whole thing together? What stops it from just falling apart? In one word, confidence. It all rests on the belief that if things really go sideways, someone powerful, a central bank, a major government, is going to step in and backstop the system. And here's the kicker. The identity of that someone, that is the hidden politics of the entire system.
Okay, so what happens when this beautifully smooth-running machine gets hit by a major shock? Well, that's when things get interesting. Because a crisis is like a stress test. It reveals all the hidden plumbing, all the parts of the system you never normally see. And this quote just nails the brutal logic of a financial crisis. Suddenly, it doesn't matter one bit how much money you're owed. The only thing that matters is when you get paid. Your very survival depends on getting cash in hand on time. Then, once the chaos subsides and the dust settles, credibility becomes the only currency that actually matters for rebuilding. And you see this life cycle play out over and over again. First, a standard is founded, a decision is made. Then it grows as more and more players join the network. But then, bam, a shock hits, and all the seams, all the weaknesses are exposed. You get these emergency, temporary measures just to stop the bleeding. And finally, a period of reform begins. And that's where everyone has to make a tough choice between efficiency, making things faster, and resilience, making them safer. It shows you that crises aren't just disasters, they're also powerful moments of creation and change.
So let's talk about the price of stability. Because after a crisis, someone always has to foot the bill to rebuild the system and get things back on track. And you can bet on one thing: those costs are never, ever shared equally. And this really lays out the crucial trade-off, the distribution of power. If you're a system hub right at the center, you get some big benefits. You get to influence the rules, you get access to that emergency liquidity, but the cost? You have to be the backstop for everyone else. Now, if you're a peripheral player, you get the benefit of predictability and stability, but you pay what's called a coordination tax. You're basically giving up some of your own autonomy to play by the main rules, and it's going to cost you a lot if you'll ever decide you want out.
And there's another sneaky little benefit for those at the center. It's called a convenience rent. By controlling the plumbing of the system, the standards, the settlement windows, all that stuff, these central actors can skim a tiny, tiny fee off every single transaction. Now, a fraction of a penny might sound like nothing, right? But you multiply that by billions and billions of trades, and it becomes a massive, massive payday.
So take a look at where the risk actually piles up when a crisis hits. It's not at the center. No. The timing risk, that critical danger of not getting paid on time, it gets pushed to the absolute edges of the network. We're talking about peripheral regions, businesses working on razor-thin margins, basically anyone who has to wait a long time to get their cash. These are the players with the least power to absorb a shock, and they're the ones left holding the bag.
So, what are the big lessons we learn from watching these systems get pushed to the brink? They're actually pretty clear. First, you have to build reroutes, backup plans. Redundancy feels expensive and wasteful, right up until the moment it's absolutely essential. Second, you have to price in the hidden risks, the externalities, because if you don't, they will price you during a shock. Third, you gotta align your incentives. Pay for reliability, not just for pure speed. And finally, and this is so important, you have to document what you've learned, because the memory of a crisis is incredibly fragile, and these lessons are too painful to learn twice.
And at the end of the day, it really all boils down to this simple, timeless principle. Measure twice, settle once. You know, that's not just a technical rule for finance geeks. It's a deep social principle for how we should build stable, trustworthy systems. Systems that can actually weather any storm. And it leaves us with a really fundamental question. Have we actually built our systems with enough care to make them last?